Every status effect in DBD explained in under 3 minutes. Ready, go. Blindness. This affects survivors and basically makes it so that they can't see any auras whatsoever. Bloodlust. This affects killers and increases their movement speeds in a long chase. There are basically 3 tiers to bloodlust, and the longer the chase, the faster the killer becomes. And the killer loses bloodlust when they hit a survivor or they break a pallet. Broken. This affects survivors and makes it so that you can't heal yourself or get healed by someone else back to the healthy state, so you're basically stuck in the injured state. Cursed. This affects survivors and appears on the right side of your screen whenever a hex perk is actively affecting the other survivors. So if you see this little cursed icon, you'll know that there's a hex totem somewhere around the map. Deep wound. This affects survivors. While you have it, your screen becomes darker and darker the longer that you have the deep wound. You have to mend or heal this deep wound within 20 seconds or else you'll go into the dying state. Endurance. This affects survivors and makes it so that they're able to take an extra hit from the killer that won't do any damage. Exhausted. This affects survivors and it's a shared cooldown from using all exhaustion perks. So every exhaustion perk you run has this same exact cooldown. You also get a cooldown immediately after getting unhooked. Exposed. This affects survivors and makes it so that the killer can one-shot the affected survivors. Haemorrhage. This affects survivors and makes it so that blood trails left by the survivors are more noticeable because you actually bleed more while you're injured. Haste. This affects both survivors and killers. The base movement speed is increased by a certain percentage. For survivors, this means you walk and run faster, and for the killer, that just means your base movement speed is faster. Hindered. This affects survivors and it's the opposite of haste. It decreases your base movement speed by a certain percentage, so you walk and run slower. Incapacitated. This affects survivors and is only used by the twins for when Victor is on you, and when Victor is actually on you, this means you can't do certain actions. Madness. This affects survivors and is only used by the doctor. This is a 3-tiered status effect which makes illusionary pallets, illusionary killers, and illusionary red stains pop up around you more frequently, and you also get much harder skill checks. Mangled. This affects survivors, and when you're the affected survivor, getting healed or healing yourself takes 20% longer, and this status effect disappears once you're fully healed. Oblivious. This affects survivors and makes it so that they can't hear the terror radius heartbeat or music. Perks needing the terror radius to activate don't activate either. Sleep penalty. This affects survivors and is only used by Freddy, and it just makes it so that it takes longer for other survivors to wake you up from the dream world. Undetectable. This affects killers and it removes the terror radius, the red stain, and the ability for survivors to see the killer's aura.